hand waving because we got kids in there saying, hello, and we want them to know that they're part of this place. Yes, indeed. You know, next week, not this coming week, but next week is a very special week. First place, the whole week, 11th through the 17th of February, is Random Acts of Kindness Week. Yes. Then on Tuesday, it is Fat Tuesday. That is Mardi Gras, right? Yeah, that's Tuesday. And on a Wednesday, it's Ash Wednesday. And on Thursday, it's Valentine's Day. Can you imagine all that in one little whack? But we got a full month coming, and everything's going to be a whole lot better, and it's going to be better because all of you are going to go out of here and do random acts of kindness during that whole week. Now, the mission of this week is an experimental week of kind acts blanketing not only this city but the entire nation. And it's inspiring people to take responsibility for themselves and for the world, to witness, to celebrate, and to promote the value and spirit of kindness, to help bridge all racial, religious, social, and economic groups, and enhance our mutual understanding of each other. Wow. We can do that.
Yes.
All right? Everybody going to do that. And actually, I don't know if that's a week thing, because it seems to me that we should be doing every day in our whole life random, senseless acts of kindness for ourselves and for other people. And I guess that's what the week is for, is to remind us we should be doing it all year long. And it was the purpose that Jesus had, including in the Beatitudes, that's in Matthew the 5th chapter, the 7th verse, in case you want to look. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Now, the dictionary defines mercy, as one way at least, as kindness in excess of what may be expected or demanded by fairness. You know, the doctrine of fairness really sounds great, just as the doctrine of justice sounds terribly great. But thank God they are not God's doctrines. Do you realize that if you only got what was fair and just, you know, equal everything out in the world as it is right now, and it was based upon some kind of human standard, your life would be pretty lacking. Might even be what you call miserable. And if you only got what was fair and just from God, what would happen to you? Just fair and just. If you had to go up to God and say, God, this is what I've done in my life, so I want you to be fair with me and just with me and dealing with me, don't you think maybe most of us would be pretty miserable? Oh my, yeah. You know, we've all bought into this thing of fairness and justice. And over the centuries, it had continued to bring misery and turmoil. Fairness and justice have never really been, who is fair, who is just, what is your definition? My definition is different from yours, because you might have something I want, and I would say it was fair if you gave me part of it. And you might say, no, that's not fair at all. It would be fair if you go out and made it for yourself or something. Yes. What we have is a wrong attitude toward life, most of us. And it's time to make an attitude change and get past that old misery. Anybody not want to get rid of their misery? Okay, that's good. Well, now this week, this expression of the kindness can go a long way in making that more of a reality it doesn't seem to have much stress in the public on kindness. As a matter of fact, if you look in a lot of books, you're not going to find very much said about kindness. This seems to be kind of an arcane thing. I don't know why, but it is. And you'd think that with all these high-tech advances we've made, it would bring about more fairness and more justice, wouldn't it? But actually what it does is just seems to keep on being what it is, because the tech stuff is used only to satisfy myself, and the heck with you. Somebody was telling me just before, it was Mike, telling me just before, he says, the guy came to another guy, and the guy said, "You got my email?" And he said, "Well, no, why don't you just tell me? I'm standing right here." And the guy said, "No, I'll send it to you in email." Any of you text nuts?
No, I don't.
Huh? Well, what we get so much in this generation is to satisfy, to get and to keep. And they call it the me generation, don't they? But one thing is certain, the satisfaction of yourself with getting things is, I'm sure you've even begun to understand, is not what it's all cracked up to be. Thomas Croward, in his Edinburgh lectures on mental science, had that kind of self-centeredness in mind when he said, quote, "If we contemplate our central position only as affording us greater advantage for the intaking, we've missed the whole point, the point of our studies. We miss the real nature of the life principle, which is action and reaction. If you would have life enter into us, we must ourselves enter into life, enter into the spirit of it, just as we must enter into the spirit of a book or a game to enjoy it. There can be no action at the center only. There must be perpetual flowing out toward the circumference." And he says outflowing consists in the habit of mind which gives itself to the good it sees in others. The mind which sees the good in others. And he says this will provide innumerable avenues for the universal livingness to flow through us, whether as giving or receiving. Now the 19th proverb spells it out in terms of kindness. And he says, you all know this one, don't you? You all remember the 19th proverb? I'll read it to you. Now listen to advice and accept instruction that you may gain wisdom for the future. The human mind may devise many plans, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will be established. The desire of a man is his kindness. It's better to be poor than a liar. And Jesus gave us a good rule for that, didn't he? Didn't he say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you? Do unto others as you would have them do to you. If you don't like what's being done to you, don't do something like that to somebody else. So whatever you do, whatever you're experiencing in your life, is only a simple and profound reflection of what you desire to be done to yourself. That's tough, isn't it? Tough. Well, that's a little scary. It says that some desire of yours, whether it be a conscious desire or a subconscious desire, may be what getting you all the lumps and losses that you're having in your life. Now, a good way to get a clue as to what is your desire, even those that are so hidden deep that you're not conscious of them, is to start monitoring your manifest words and deeds. Begin to monitor. Better yet, just resolve to change any non-productive desire through your prayer work, through your meditation, and through speaking and acting kindly. Jesus gave us a wonderful illustration of the value of this in a story he told. It's called the Parable of the Good Samaritan, and it starts out in the 25th verse of the 10th chapter of Luke. And behold, a lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What's written in the law? How do you read? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus said to him, You have answered right. Do this, and you will live. But now, that needs some clarification. So Jesus tells this little story. He says, But he, desiring to be justified to himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he set him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will pay you when I return. Which of these 3 do you think proved neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? And the man replied, He, the one who showed mercy on him. And Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise. Go and do likewise. This is a parable that has 47,000 different lessons in it. I'm going to try to hold on to just one. We only have a limited amount of time. And there's several layers of meaning to it. For example, notice that the victim was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. The priest and the Levite were going to Jerusalem from Jericho. Now, Jesus' listeners would have understood that it was not hardness of heart that necessarily that caused the priest and Levite to go on the other side, because there was a rule in the church at that time that said that if you're going to serve in the temple and you touch somebody that's dead, then you're no longer clean. You become unclean, and therefore you are unable to serve. So the Levite and the priest wanted to continue to be served, so they went to the other side, maybe. That could have been then a sense of duty that caused them to go on the other side of the road, and not some hard-hearted action. But there is still a dilemma here, isn't there? Which is the higher calling for you or for me? To show kindness or perform our duty when there's a conflict? Now, the question of loving your neighbor as you love yourself is the issue that Jesus was illustrating. And he's saying, quite simply, show mercy in spite of whatever duty you may think you have. Or perhaps better, don't make any arbitrary rules in your life that place you in a position of not being able to do the kind thing. Now, in any case, Jesus as always was talking at 2 levels. He's talking at the material level and at the spiritual level. He told the lawyer outright that he was to do acts of kindness without regard for personal return. By its nature, Kindness asks for no payment in return or even recognition. Kindness is the extension of ourself beyond our usual boundaries and is used for the help or service of somebody else. Kindness must then come from an open heart that helps just because it seems right and beneficial to do so. Isn't that strange? Both the acts of kindness we give and those that we receive are usually the rock from which we draw our hope and from which we call the joy in our lives. It is the proof of goodness in life. But there's more to this. Jesus not only tells the lawyer to do good, he at the spiritual level is saying that the drawing forth of the experience of good in all ways in life comes from adopting the same spiritual consciousness as that Samaritan. Remember, Samaritans had a different religion. They were half-bloods or whatever, and they were scorned. But Jesus is saying, out of that consciousness, kind acts naturally arise to bring even greater shared peace, joy, and fulfillment. So we say, well, what is this consciousness we're talking about? Well, that consciousness is when you are totally supportive of those who come to you or upon whom you come, to see them as they truly are, not as they appear to be. To empathize with their desire to be released from pain or misery or whatever. To be able to help them out of their pain or poverty, whether or not you can escape from your own pain and poverty. Tall order. Tall order. To encourage them in finding the way to joy and peace, and to simply be compassionate and helpful in those areas in which at the moment they can't help themselves, or in which they ask for help from you. Which is another lesson all by itself, isn't it? Never offer help to somebody that hadn't asked you for it. It never works, they never take it, and you'll always be the bad guy. That's the lesson. Okay. In this consciousness, you point out to others, when you are helping them out of their pain, or when they've asked you for your help, then you are in effect helping them out of their pain. You're helping them to strengthen their eternality. You're helping them to strengthen their relationship to God, and perhaps even to discover their undiscovered creative powers. So in this consciousness, you show by your life and your actions that there is absolutely no limit to God's good to those who just accept and seek out that good. And this consciousness, you will be said to be forgiving. You will be said to be non-judgmental. And Sig Paulson, one of the great unity ministers who's already passed on, says that unforgiveness, that is disapproval, guilt, condemnation, damnation, hell, fear, resentment, hatred, dislike, all of these are always hardest on the one who practices it. Forgiveness is always self-forgiveness. He said, quite often, the sins of others exist only, certainly most vividly, in our own consciousness. Others may be blissfully unaware of how they have, quote, wronged us. When we're unduly self-concerned and sensitive, almost any act can become a sin in our sight. The hurts and resentments that are buried in most of humanity are as much the product of the individuals carrying the load of anyone else's responsibility. As the feeling of love expands in us, fear and resentment are decreased, and forgiveness becomes more spontaneous. Now, I got to tell you, it is very true that forgiveness may not be fair and just. How many times I've heard this over the years in my role as a counselor to people. It's not fair. There's no justice here at all. Look at what he's done, or I've done, they've done, and somebody else has done. Look at what's happening to me and my, on and on and on and on and on. And it's all so self-centered that they can't believe that they had anything at all to do with it. And Jesus tells us, and I'm going to tell you, that the way out of that dilemma is to start to forgive everything and anything that ever happened in your life that you didn't like. Now, you're not going to forget it. This idea of forgetting it is really ridiculous. You know, forgive and forget. You don't ever forget the things that happened. But by golly, you can turn on in your mind and look at that with a different viewpoint, and it will no longer hurt you. It will no longer worry you. It will no longer take you to the depths of despair. Instead, it will lay it to you as a beacon of light to the good that God is. And I know that that sounds so corny in a way, but it's absolutely the truth, friends, that as soon as you cleanse yourself of any of these ideas that the troubles of your life are their making, and you begin to understand that all of those troubles are of your own making, then you quit blaming God. How many of you blamed God in your younger days? Something happened? Why'd God do that to me? Why'd God take my mother from me? Why'd God cause me to lose my job? Why'd God? God had nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact, God was standing there all the time pushing you, saying, hey, stop doing what you're doing, stop thinking the way you're thinking, change your attitude, and as soon as you do, I'm going to show you a world that's really great and good. That's what God is. That's His role in your life. No other role. No other condemnation. There ain't no hell except the hell you create for yourself. Actually, there's no heaven except the one you create for yourself. Sorry about that, but it's the truth. Now, assuming that you can understand that with me, you can see the value of kindness, which will always involve clearing your mind of any condemnation of any other person, place, or thing. It's called forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiveness actually literally means to give, and to give ourselves a new and improved reaction to what is happening or what has happened. Just to see it differently. How many of you have had a swift kick in the pants sometime in your life that you thought was the most horrible thing that could ever happen to you? Why, how in the world could something like that happen to me? Who did they think they were? You know that. And then you go down the road a little way, and all of a sudden you see that by that act, that kick, you were going on this way in life, and then you started on a new path, and all of a sudden you found out that that kick was the very thing you needed the most to get your life in order to make you live a better and more wholesome, more satisfying life. Happens all the time, friends. And every time it's happened to you, you should go back and review it and say, thank God for that incident. Now let me look at it in its true light. And its true light is that it was going to help you to find your good in this world. That doesn't mean you want it to happen again. And you're going to take precautions for that by being kind and good and thinking positive and affirmative thoughts. You don't want the future to look that way. But you can turn around and look at the past and say, oh yeah, there were several things that happened there, but they were all, I can look at them all now and say they were good, just as the rest of it was good. And here I am. I'm doing my thing. And I guess the thing I want to end up with is just to remind you that there is a reward for kindness. It's not there. The person you're kind to probably not going to even know it, and maybe they'll even resent it. That's not your business. Your business is to be kind. And when you are kind, you get your reward, but that reward doesn't come from the other person, the circumstance, or the place. That reward comes from God, who will continue at that moment to lovingly, gently take your burdens and replace them with peace, joy, prosperity at home. Wholeness. Can you get any better deal than that? I mean, go into the marketplace and find some place where you can get such a deal for life as you get by just simply changing your mind and becoming kind and forgiving.